Hey YouTube, long time no see. It's been a while since my last video. I had a lot of content filmed actually while I was in Europe, which is probably the last time I posted a video, almost like a year ago. But I just felt like my heart wasn't really in the videos I was making, the content I was making, so I decided to just call it quits for now. Either way, it's 2019 and I think I'm ready to come back to video, come back to YouTube, try it out a little bit, create some more content, but yeah, we'll see where it goes. Anyways, today I'm going to be going through a full editing workflow for this edit right here, and then I'm going to do my best to go through my Lightroom workflow, how I bring it into Photoshop, what I do in Photoshop, and I'm going to do my best to not use presets, not use plugins or anything that's too fancy or things that people might not have. I'll just be explaining just my thought processes, what I'm doing, and how I go about it. In future videos, I plan to cover more advanced topics and topics about specific software plugins like Color Effects Pro, Tony Kuiper's Luminosity Mask, and whatnot. But for now, I just want to keep it simple, keep it so that content that everyone who's using Lightroom and Photoshop can learn from and take from. So yeah, let's get into it. Okay, so we're gonna start with this image from Hong Kong, and first thing I'm gonna do is bring down the highlights and the whites just because it was kind of blowing out a little bit. Just because I want to make sure I retain the details in the shadows. And I'm really just playing around with a lot of different settings. Usually I add contrast, just because raw files will really flatten out your images. Still felt like a little bit dark, so I just tried playing with exposure. Right now it's a lot of experimenting and tweaking. As you can see, I don't always go -100, +100, -100. This is sort of just an extreme image, and to be honest, it's kind of working out. There's no real rules to editing, so even if it seems like pretty crazy, you know, sometimes the image just calls for it. Real quick, I'm just going to do my cropping. So cropping to a 4:5, because specifically this image is going to be for Instagram, and also the way it's shot, obviously I think it fits much better as a vertical. Again, there's no real set rule to this. I'm just trying to do my best to both center the road, but also keep the photo balanced visually. So there's a slight curve in the road down the back, so it's actually might not be best centered. I don't know if it makes sense, but I think once you play around with some of these images, you'll realize that even if it looks somewhat symmetrical, parts of it, it's not always balanced because you have to actually balance the different elements in there. Now with the transform tool, I usually just try vertical and auto first to see how it works, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. In this case, kind of like the effect for auto. If those don't work, I'll actually go to the last setting and manually keystone, and I'll probably do another tutorial on just specifics on how to do keystoning in Lightroom, Capture One, Photoshop, and using Photoshop to warp when keystoning doesn't work super well. But for now, I think it's working fine. Right now, I'm still not fully happy with all different tones. I'm just experimenting with different settings. You'll notice that I don't use the curves as much. That's just a personal preference. When I use curves, I like using it in Photoshop because I just find it much smoother for me. Right now, I think the blacks might be just a little bit too dark. I'm not sure. Now, as you noticed, I already had my calibrations set for my camera. You're gonna have to set that for your own camera and that lens, but I would highly recommend it. It'll help remove the vignetting and the distortion caused by your lens. Now I'm just in the HSL panel, the hue, saturation, and luminance panel, and I'm just playing around with different colors that I see, trying to make the colors a little bit more harmonious. I sometimes bring up the color wheel and go for something very specific. Sometimes I kind of just wing it. Right now I'm just gonna wing it. This is especially with cityscapes and shots like this where I'm not trying to make the perfect image or really manipulate everything. I'm just trying to balance images colors a bit more. And again, this is really with experimentation and experience. Over time, you kind of get to know what colors work with each other. Obviously, what colors are complementary, which ones do not work well. And then you also get your own personal color palette, not necessarily like your signature, but just the colors that you like and the colors that you don't like. For me, I don't really love too much magenta or pinks, so I change this all to blue. And then because the lights in the street are so yellow, they're overwhelmingly yellow, I'm going to tweak the white balance a little bit too. I'm going to try injecting the shadows a little bit with some split toning, some blues in the shadows, just see what it looks like. I don't always split tone. I know a lot of people like live and swear by split toning. I'm not one of those people. I think it's very powerful, very useful, but it's just not really a giant part of my workflow. As you can see, you can barely see it. It's still making a subtle difference, but I don't use split toning most of the time as the heavy color grading tool. I usually use other tools like the curves tool and color balance in Photoshop to do my color work. So I also shifted all my magentas and purples more towards the reds and while desaturating them because I don't want them to be overwhelming in any way. Yellows can be a bit challenging because it's so the range is so low, to be honest, between like greens and oranges sometimes, where like just a little bit too much to the right turns into kind of a sickly green, and a little bit too much to the left turns into like a uncanny sort of yellow or orange. But I think I'm okay with this for now. Now I'm going to bring it into Photoshop, where I'm going to do finishing touches, fix anything else if I see or I feel is necessary. And if you notice any lag on what I'm saying, or if things feel a little bit, the pace feels weird, is actually because this is a voiceover of a recording I did. The reason I didn't just do it live and narrate through my actual thought process was I had a friend crashing who was sleeping in the back, and I just wanted to disturb them when I was filming this, so I just filmed them separately, and now I'm just doing a voiceover afterwards, kind of explaining my decisions. Now, I don't always do this with the curves in terms of like using one of the presets. Right now I'm just doing it to be fast and just get a quick S-curve that I'm manipulating. Normally I'm just going to use my own S-curve. Yeah. As always, S-curve will give you more contrast, and if you reverse it, it gives you less contrast. This one's not quite an S-curve. It's a little bit weird. That's more like an S-curve now. But at the moment it's a little bit too contrasty, so I'm playing with bringing up the blacks. Although I don't like to fade my photos that much. Usually only a very little bit, just because I think the fade is it's a bit outdated, and to be honest, it's just not my look. It's not my preference for my photos usually. So I'll very rarely use heavy fade nowadays. Now, I just create a stamp layer. In case you're curious on how to do a stamp layer, it's for Macs at least, it's Command Shift Alt E, I think, or Option E. And that creates basically just a layer that has all the layers below it compressed into one image, but instead of flattening down, it just creates an image on top. That way you retain your layers in case you want to change things later. And then I'd use a high pass filter. You don't have to set it to specifically 5 or 6 or anything. I just go to a number, usually relatively low, below 10, and where it seems a little bit sharper, and you can start to see outlines without extreme white haloing. And then I put it to overlay and bring down the opacity because it's a pretty strong effect right now. And in this case, I'm going to apply it to the entire image because it is a landscape instead of having like a portrait where I usually only apply it to like the eyes and the lips. Again, another stamp layer, and the reason for this is because I'm going to be adding a Gaussian blur, and you can only add that to a single layer. Now I'm going to bump up the contrast and the brightness not all the way, but a good amount on the Gaussian blur layer. Bring it down to a soft light, and then drag that opacity way down, and this will act as my Orton effect. There's a lot of different ways to do an Orton effect. If you weren't familiar with the Orton effect, it just gives a soft little glow and blur to your image, and a softness, especially to the lights, which can be very pleasing. Cuts down on some of the just how sharp everything is in a uniform and pleasing way. I don't use it always. I think some people overdo it. I just like to use it sparingly usually and selectively. But for cityscapes like this, where there's a lot of lights, I think it gives just a nice soft glow that really brings everything together. Now I use a cursor layer just to bring midtones down a little bit, and then using my gradient tool, I'm creating my basically I'm creating a custom vignette because I don't want it to be circular. I just want it on the sides. You can also use a paintbrush and paint it in, or whatever tool you want to do your mask. For me, for this image specifically, there's a very clear road in the middle that I want to highlight, and so I'm just going to use the gradient tool because it's very simple and easy for this. And then I'm going to do the reverse, where I'm bringing up the midtones with my curves tool, and I'm going to do the same thing except in reverse. So on a white mask, and then I'm using the gradient tool with the black paintbrush selected. If you're not familiar with how the gradient tool works, when you drag your mouse over, however long the distance that drag is, it's how large the gradient is, or large the gradient basically will be. And then I create a group, and I add a mask to the group, and then I just, with a low opacity brush, black brush, I just painted it a little bit up there because I felt like the vignette was a little bit too strong, or like the brightening was a little bit too strong, and I didn't really want to highlight that part so much. Again, another stamp layer. I use stamp layers a lot. In a way, it's slightly destructive, but it works for my workflow. If you find something else that works for you, go for it. This just works for me, and lets me to kind of save my progress almost at different increments. Now I'm using a channel mixer, and what I'm actually doing is I'm applying a filter, and it's a way to kind of mute your tones a little bit. So instead of desaturating all your colors, which can be kind of shitty sometimes, I'm using a channel mixer to first desaturate everything to monochromatic, and then I'm slowly bleeding the colors back in by changing the channel mixer or the black and white layer to a very, very low opacity. I think it was a opacity of 5, and then I bump the vibrance a little bit. I could not explain the math beyond how it works, and usually it's very subtle. Sometimes it works wonders, sometimes it doesn't work so well, but for me, I like to use it sometimes to just mute my colors just a little bit. Now, doing one more curves layer. And I'm brushing in ever so slightly with a white brush with a relatively shallow opacity. Again, another vignette. With some hand painting it instead of using the gradient tool, just so I have a little bit more control of exactly what's going. So as you see, as I shift that entire group on and off, it makes a big difference. A lot of these really minor adjustments that maybe at first glance, like you didn't even feel like you saw anything different, when you add them up, it turns into a big change and a big difference. Anyways, I didn't realize that I kind of cut the editing portion of this a little bit abrupt with no real ending, but normally I would go on a little bit more with a couple of different plugins, the Color Effects Pro, the Nick Color Effects Pro plugin, and use some filters there, and then I also have some sharpening actions that help me resize and sharpen for the web specifically. That's how I can post images on Facebook and Instagram with absolutely no compression, or seemingly no compression and no image quality loss. But like I said, I think earlier, or maybe I didn't mention it, but the goal of this show really was to show you guys a quick editing workflow from Lightroom to Photoshop with no external plugins, presets, or actions that people have to purchase or make. In the future, I'll definitely go over some of the actions I've made for myself, some of the actions that I use, either how I make them, or where I bought them if they're from third parties. And of course, I hope to make some actions that will be released to you guys that you guys can hopefully use and use on your images. But for now, I really want to create a video that showcases a workflow without any of the other things, and just show you what you can do with just Lightroom and Photoshop. This one's a bit quick. This is actually my first well, you know this is my first YouTube tutorial where I'm actually doing a voiceover. I'm still quite new to this. I didn't have any script. So I hope you guys weren't too confused. I hope things weren't too fast, and I hope you guys were able to learn a thing or two. If there's anything that wasn't clear or confusing, or I just didn't explain things well, please leave a comment down below or DM me about it. And if you reference specific timestamps and things, I'll do my best to answer your questions. I'm doing these videos just so I can kind of verbalize and understand my own workflow more, and also so I can teach some of you guys who are hoping to learn a little something about Photoshop, editing, etc. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed. Thank you so much, and hopefully see you again in the future.